that. So first of all, I wanted to talk about the word placemaking, which always makes me cringe, I think, because it suggests that the places we work haven't been a place before we arrived. It's pretty patronising. And I know that where I'm from, if somebody came into the place I'm from and suggested that they were going to do a placemaking activity there, I don't think I'd feel so happy about it. So that's one point. And then I think something that you all touched on in various ways was this kind of idea of public art when it becomes like social work. And something that we've kind of spoken about a little bit is this word useful that's often used when talking about working with artists, especially in a socially engaged way. And it would be really useful to get your thoughts on those two words as briefly as possibly. You can just say two words if you want. I'll start with you, Jane.
I feel like, in a way, both of those have something to do with kind of time. You know, placemaking kind of sort of alludes to the idea that you've sort of made something and it's done. You know, and it, rather than it being a process and an emphasis on the kind of adjective side of it. And so I think that's the kind of most problematic thing about it. And it's when those words sort of become static in their use or co-opted. Like, there are lots of great words out there that now almost mean nothing. So it's who's using them and why. And in a way, also not getting too lost in fetishizing about spending loads of time talking about deconstructing what those words mean, because then we are distracted from the work. And yeah, Verity and I were talking actually earlier about the kind of whole idea of sort of the burden that gets put on the notion that like the artist is going to like save some sort of problem or can offer something better, and it's kind of removed from what I think potentially is an overlap in our thinking about being more of a kind of person can kind of help manifest some provocations. But also, you know, we've got very different practices as well, and we're only going to actually be working on one particular part of what could be a place that could benefit from loads of different artists. You know, it's often like we got an artist in, like we're very different. We have different communities. So, that's my reflection, I suppose.
Verity? A different artist perspective?
God, I think so much about it. It's really hard to do this snappily. So I think, I personally think that placemaking as a term is bullshit. I really genuinely do, but I say that as an artist, and I also, there's a group of people in my professional network who are constantly talking about this, and I think it's just in the absence of any other word, this becomes this placeholder for ways of working, methodologies, and I suppose I find it really irritating as an artist because I think it becomes quite a loaded canon when it appears in briefs and ambition of what your role might then become as the artist. And I also think residents, people, they're just like, well, what is this? Yeah. What do you mean? I don't know. That's a whole other symposium, I think, for me.
Yeah, I think it might be. Yeah.
And then the usefulness. I just don't know if everything that I do should be useful, or if it's possible that everything I do is useful. I guess I just trying to be responsive and trying to make good work, but give platform to people to have more power in the places that they're living and working, but without trying to fix things or make places better.
Absolutely. Yeah. Barbara?
I already mentioned that I have huge problems with the term placemaking. I'm really convinced that this is the task of our whole society, of the politicians who are governing, of every individual, of each citizen, to together think about and imagine and create visions of the world we want to live in. And when I looked at the different presentations today, you know, and that's why I said I'm coming from the outside. We're having a very critical approach towards placemaking in the German-speaking countries. We don't use it, and I mean the problem is that after a certain period of time, you know, slowly then people start to adapt the Anglo-American developments and also the bad ones. So this term has started to come up. But I think we really come still from this social democratic background and very strong awareness of the legacy we've had with the Red Vienna. And somehow it's still embedded in our veins, even though we're having this right-wing government. So I really think that the responsibility of urban planning starts with the responsibility of imagining a welfare and spaces for conflict, for different interests all together. And I'm really in favor of promoting an artistic thinking and acting as part of developing those perspectives. And I think that artists need to be placed on, and this came too short in my short presentation now, they need to be placed on an equal level to other experts in society. They need to be paid on an equal level. It's not like the extra that comes in at a certain point, sometimes more fitting, sometimes less fitting, but it's always at the reflecting the power structures of who has the money. So the person or the body, whoever that is, if it is the developer or the political body, whatever, they decide when we are allowed to come in.
Absolutely.
And I think we have to get rid of that type of thinking completely, you know, and I'm not in the position anymore that I want to ask for something. I think it finally has to be understood that the role we play in society is completely under-recognized, and even if it's only for avoiding larger conflicts, you know, even if it's not for the appreciation of our capabilities, of our abilities, of what we can contribute. And I really think that's why symposiums and conferences like this are so important to advocate for.
Yeah,
for
very
that.
much. Yeah.
Can I say something on that?
Yeah.
Really quickly. I think that the role of, in the public realm and in the built environment, anything that's kind of involving planning, the role of the artist on the design team should be one that's really asserted front and centre.
Absolutely.
Because quite often we're in at the
Coming at the
beginning
end,
to get things warm, or at the very end.
Or there's a certain pocket where people realize, oh, something is missing. Then
Or often I find the team changes, so something begins well, the team changes, and then that intention shifts, and the artist really suffers. Zoe, do you want to?
Yeah, and maybe, perhaps if artists were more embedded from the beginning, the term placemaking, there'd be more more imagination, there'd be newer words that came into existence. But yeah, I agree, it's got quite like negative connotations. It's probably should be more about valuing places and supporting and maintaining places that already exist, or kind of amplifying the voices of the people in those places as well. And I think in terms of useful, I think it's Eastside use it in a bit of a playful way as well. So the use might not be functional. It's kind of also it might be that it's thought-provoking. It might be something that's not as tangible as being kind of a functional thing, but sometimes it can be as well.
That's great. Does anybody want to ask a question in the audience? Not about bank holidays.
Everyone's really tired.
Oh, great. Okay, amazing. You're both going to keep them short so we can have two, yeah? Great, okay.
It's for Zoe. I just wondered if Eastside's manifesto could be considered as a manifesto for the mass wholesale art washing of private property developers and the hoovering up of S106 money by one arts organisation in place of perhaps other community users.
I mean, it definitely. I think that you are kind of considering it that, and it could be, but yeah, I wouldn't necessarily agree. And it's like it's not really a manifesto, but it's like the approach that we're taking.
Yeah, no, I mean, the Section 106 money, I don't think and we'd be quite happy to collaborate with those other organisations as well, and I think it is being redistributed to the artists that we're working with, and then back into that community. And so the Section 106 money in Banbury is actually a fairly affluent area as well, but there's still, you know, Section 106 money there that would be spent in a different way, and this is maybe a way of engaging actually quite like a more privileged community, which in the kind of remit of where the Section 106 money could be spent, which actually borders less affluent communities, which will benefit from those public artworks because they're in the public realm. So all of those are situated in the public realm. So I don't know, I think it's, yeah, you could argue that, and it can be problematic, but I think Eastside, I think artists need to be part of that process, and artist-led organisations are kind of as good a kind of organisation as any to be part of that, yeah, at the forefront of it if we can be. Jess?
Thank you all very much for that. That was really rich and interesting. I wanted to pick on something that Verity said about owning your own politics, and it was just, I felt actually that it was important to discuss at what point you feel as an artist or a curator that your involvement in a project could be compromising, or how much you put, you know, of your own personal political passions into your role as an artist or curator. And I'm thinking how much I've been doing that, and at what point at which I've compromised myself on working on a certain project, or maybe being really intent on drawing up an all-female shortlist, or, you know, I just wondered if there was any point that any of you could talk about that you thought your sort of personal political interests have been potentially compromises, or we've decided to draw the line.
Good question, Jess. Does someone want to answer it first?
You kick off. Sounds like you've got something.
No, I'm going to think about. I'm going to think about it.
I could say something.
Yeah.
Well, because, you know, Assemble is a group of 20 people who were brought together around the kind of idea of making something together. Started from actually like a really personal realisation of something, and sort of turned into our practice. And internally we have a lot of different politics. So it's a point of contention within ourselves as a practice, not just, I don't think necessarily the individual has the kind of agency to decide how much their politics can manifest in the work, because they're having to manage and intersect with so many relationships. And I finished my PhD last year, which was looking at the work of an architect called Lina Bobardi in Brazil, and Alison and Peter Smithson at the ICA, and it was looking specifically at their relationship as kind of architects with kind of significant arts organisations, so the Museum of Art of Sao Paulo and the ICA, and what that does. And really part of the sort of thing that was really clear is the notion that I've sort of been thinking about a lot, is that, like, as practitioners, we have to kind of almost be outside of politics, but act politically always. Like, every action we have has a political impact, and we should be aware of it. But we need to be, in a way, it's quite difficult to be aligned with one or the other, because the very act of practice means that you are compromised. You are sort of always working within those power structures. And, you know, one of the key things that I think, in a way, it's not about like what you can do, but at the moment within Assemble, I think particularly it's like we never want to make the best of a bad situation, you know, and you know, have to work for someone who you like really fundamentally disagree with, because you need the job, or because you're there already, or because something's changed. And I think it's really important for artists to be able to have the agency, or anyone working in any kind of environment, to be able to stand up and like reject certain systems that are just completely kind of abjectly wrong. Sorry.
I think for me it's about that thing I was talking about constantly revisiting the brief, being transparent, constantly I think agenda is really important as well, like as an artist, being really open about why you're working in certain ways, why you're in a place. Like, I'm not from Barking and Dagenham, I'm not from Thamesmead, so I'm not a resident there, but I have been working there for a really long time. That doesn't make me an expert on that place. And I think then in terms of, when I say own your own politics, it's about constantly, I've been talking to a couple of people about this today, about constantly revisiting what that means at different stages of the work. If you're working in a really long-term way, things change. Things develop, relationships develop, and as long as you're constantly kind of evaluating as you're going along, rather than just at the point of the beginning, middle and end, as to align with funding applications, and you're not just evaluating with yourself, you're evaluating with the people you're making the work with. I think it's just being very aware of those things. I'm really, really stubborn, so I've turned down loads of work because I don't like the organisation, or I couldn't align myself with them. But I think a conversation I was having earlier on with somebody about how, the decline of the public sector, we're all having to get funding or do projects that are funded by different funding streams. So I think with that, it's about just being really open and honest that this is funded by a developer. But what I want to do within this, where the pushing the brief back across the table, is that I want to critique that process. I want to critique this as part of my commission. Because, I think where it becomes a bit more complicated is where people try and hide or deny how they're getting funding, and there's a dislocation for me then of the two things. But, we all need to pay our rent. Like, if you're not...
And it's very rare to get an opportunity that is...
and especially now, and I think it's really complicated. And I suppose one of the things I've been trying to develop, I'm really aware there's a massive picture of me over my head. It's quite weird. When you're... I guess it's been an accident, but I've really always enjoyed having these different projects being funded by lots of different people. So, and what that means to have a multiple stakeholder group. So, one commission, there's two different departments from a local authority, the Arts Council, and then a demolition company. So they all look at your work in a different way. One of them looks at it as a piece of marketing. Two of the departments, the Art Department and the Arts Council, look at it as artwork. The Regen team, this is going to make their development look good. As long as I'm aware of that as an artist, and I can have the conversation between them all.
You're making the new Shoreditch for them.
Well, or you're not, or if that narrative suddenly starts to run in kind of 10 years later, then you start to think, maybe I'd like to go and work somewhere else.
Barbara, do you want to add anything to that?
Yeah, just an aspect from a different angle, because I think that as artists we have the ability to create communication also between conflicting parties. So this question of just where we draw the line, I just want to give a really interesting example that made me think a lot about my own prejudices. We were involved in a public art project for Public Art Styria, which was meant to be the starting point for the rational process. We were invited to create some kind of structure, which would then be handed over to other artists, continuing with the project. I'm not talking about the project. I mean the concept of the project. But the interesting thing was that we were collaborating with those shopkeepers because it was about empty storefronts, and we were asked to resolve the problem of empty stores. And of course, we said we cannot do that. We proposed our project, which was a pavilion discussing commons, new types of commons. And at a certain point, the head of this organization of the shopkeepers came and said, it's really great collaborating with you, such an interesting project. And the project went very well. And then the head of the Public Arts Committee of Styria came and asked us how the project was coming along. I said, it's such a great collaboration with that person. And he said, well, Barbara, I have to tell you something. She is a member of the right-wing party in the city government. We were not aware of that when we started this whole collaboration, and it's up to you how you deal with that situation now. And I have to say we were shocked in the first moment, But then I really thought, no, this is exactly what we need. She was interested in our approach, extremely supportive, extremely open-minded in all conversations. So the perfect anchor point to enter in a discussion with somebody whom you usually would consider the enemy.
Well, I think otherwise we exist
We always
in a
talk
vacuum.
among ourselves. I mean, getting even more and more into details, criticizing us from the left perspective rather than opening up to this other.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
No, it's a really important point. It really is. I think we probably need to call it a day, don't we? Claire's like, yeah, time. So, Barbara, Verity, Jane, thank you so much.
Thank you.